from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories: returning to ruins. Palestinians pick up the pieces in Gaza's Khan Yunis as Israel vows to press ahead with its offensive in nearby Rafah. Our other headlines: Nicaragua tells the United Nations highest court that Germany is enabling genocide in Gaza. US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says relations with Beijing are on a stronger footing as she ends her visit to China. And total eclipse of the sun. Stargazers splash out on the event of a lifetime. Palestinians are returning to the devastated city of Khan Yunis in Gaza after Israel withdrew most of its troops. Khan Yunis has been under Israeli bombardment for months, but the withdrawal is being interpreted as tactical. Israel's defense minister says the military is now preparing for a future operation in nearby Rafah, where it says Hamas militants remain. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Akram Al-Satari, who's in Rafah. Akram, what's the situation like in Khan Yunis?
Well, as a matter of fact, Khan Yunis is totally destroyed. The scenes of the destruction can be seen everywhere. You turn your face. Life has been shattered in that. People return to Khan Yunis in the hope that they can find anything. Some of the people return to Khan Yunis to try to search for their dear ones who stayed under the rubble. Up to this particular moment, around 56 bodies were retrieved by the civilians and also by the civil defense and the teams of Ministry of Health who have been looking for the bodies of the people. The streets are totally destroyed. The houses are totally destroyed. No infrastructure in Khan Yunis. Everything that can help people live in Khan Yunis has already been destroyed. Houses, full blocks were destroyed and reduced to rubble. When you see the people walking down the streets, you see their faces covered with dust because of the fact they have been walking on the sand that was mixed with cement, and they have almost nothing left in that particular area. Every single person that I talked to had sustained some loss of any kind, either lost their home totally or came back to their home to find it partially destroyed or standing with severe damages because of the bombardment. Khan Yunis as a city is destroyed with no infrastructure, with almost no homes, and with no possibility of people returning and leading a normal life or even semi-normal life in that area.
And Akram, what's the latest we've heard from Hamas on the progress of any ceasefire negotiations?
There are mixed and conflicted messages coming from Cairo. Egyptian officials have been stressing that progress that has been achieved and we are close to a deal, an agreement between Hamas and Israel, while officials from Hamas and Israel were stating that the agreement is not close and that there is still a long way before an agreement can be reached. Hamas reiterated its conditions and said they will not accept any agreement unless those conditions are met. Israel from its side has been stressing again that Hamas is asking for unrealistic demands, and that has been trying to dictate things that are inappropriate given the context of the military confrontation between Israel and Hamas. Israel sees itself as the one that has the upper hand in that ongoing military confrontation, while Hamas is still insisting they will not accept any agreement unless the four conditions laid by Hamas in the very beginning of the negotiation on March 14 are met, which is the full withdrawal of the Israeli army from the whole Gaza Strip, full and complete allowance of the unhindered rebuilding materials in the Gaza Strip, and also the release of all the Palestinian prisoners according to a deal that was portrayed by Hamas as a final step towards the full agreement that would ensure the full stoppage of the war.
Akram, thank you for that. Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari in Rafah. Well, let's get the view from Israel now and talk to our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Sarah, an Israeli minister has issued a new threat over this planned Rafah operation. What's happened? What more can you tell us?
He certainly has, Jamie. This is the far-right National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir. He is threatening to once again bring down the government. He says, talking about Benjamin Netanyahu, that if the Prime Minister decides to end this war without a large-scale offensive down into that southern city of Rafah to defeat Hamas, then he will no longer have the mandate to serve as the Prime Minister. Now, this, of course, is on the back of this troop pullout of Khan Yunis, also as these hostage and ceasefire negotiations are ongoing in Cairo, and as these large demonstrations have been taking place right across the country. So certainly a lot of pressure there on Benjamin Netanyahu from his far-right coalition partners, also, of course, from the United States. We've heard time and time again from Israel's closest ally that Rafah is a red line. Joe Biden saying Netanyahu should not go there. And then there's also this pressure, of course, from these families of these hostages that are still inside the Gaza Strip, and really from many parts of society here in Israel, with these anti-government protests happening day after day. Let's take a listen to what a few of these people in Jerusalem overnight had to say.
The world should condemn it. The world should stand and to be with Israel against Hamas, and to do anything that they can do to help us. And for our government, we demand them to do things as soon as possible and not to waste time.
Everybody here has had enough. These are our people, and we can't stand another day without them coming home. And it's above politics, it's above religion, it's a humanitarian issue.
And Jamie, the Defence Minister Yoav Gallant, he's just spoken out to a few newly drafted soldiers, telling them that he believes Israel is right now in an opportune moment to bring these captives home, but it will require making very difficult decisions.
Sarah, let's just put that to one side and just a thought on the latest developments with tensions on Israel's northern border.
Well, Jamie, these cross-border escalations are continuing. Just before we came on air, rocket alert sirens, hostile aircraft sirens have been ringing out in the north. And this came after another incident around 2 or so hours ago of what appears to be an explosive-laden drone that reportedly came from southern Lebanon. It was shot down in Israeli territory, landing in an open area, but certainly major hostilities there in the north. Overnight, the IDF carried out an airstrike on what it says is a senior Hezbollah commander. He is Ali Ahmed Hassin. The military says that he was responsible for planning terror attacks against Israelis in the north, like launching rockets. And also this comes as the United Nations is deeply concerned, saying that there is still time for de-escalation between these two sides, saying that there is still room for diplomacy, with a senior UN official saying that the gradual expansion of scope and scale in these confrontations raises the risk of miscalculation and further deterioration of an already very alarming situation, amid fears that this front will be the next to explode. Jamie.
Sarah, thank you for that. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. The European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, says its naval mission in the Red Sea has repelled attacks on 11 civilian ships. The Iran-backed Houthi rebels have been targeting vessels in the Red Sea in what they say is a show of solidarity with Palestine. It's led to companies rerouting their ships, and businesses in Europe are being hit by supply chain problems, with many struggling to get hold of raw materials from Asian suppliers. Our correspondent John Beaver reports.
Germany's chemical industry is big business. With annual sales of more than $250 billion, it's the third largest sector after cars and engineering. But all three have been hit by supply chain problems because of the attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. And it's a similar story for businesses across Europe. Many are struggling to get hold of what they need from their Asian suppliers.
Supply chains are there to ensure people's supply, and currently they're not very stable. Ships must detour around the Cape of Good Hope while we wait for raw materials, which now take considerably longer.
Ships that avoid the Red Sea and divert south increase their transit time by almost 2 weeks. The longer distance also pushes up cost. After the pandemic and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, problems with supply chains are nothing new in Europe, but measures are being taken to try and fight back. US-led operations in the Red Sea have struck Houthi targets in Yemen and continue to try and protect civilian vessels in the area. In February, the European Union launched Operation Aspides, its own defensive naval mission.
Its mandate is to protect the ships that are passing through the Red Sea and parts of the Gulf, Arabian or Persian Gulf, if you want. So it has defensive tasks to protect the ships. So, of course, part of this defensive task, part of the mandate is to intercept and destroy everything that is being shot at these commercial vessels.
Tesla was forced to suspend most production at its factory near Berlin for 2 weeks because of supply issues. And similar problems have hit everything from toys to home appliances. Red Sea shipping is responsible for between 12 to 15% of all global trade, according to the World Economic Forum. Attacks have been taking place for almost 5 months, and despite Western efforts to try and limit their impact, Europe is braced for prolonged disruption whilst the conflict in Gaza continues. John Beaver, CGTN, Brussels.
The United Nations highest court is hearing claims that Germany is enabling genocide in Gaza by providing military and financial aid to Israel. United Nations member state Nicaragua wants the International Court of Justice to use emergency measures to stop Berlin's support for Israel. It claims that safeguards in the Geneva Convention are being breached in Gaza. The United Nations nuclear watchdog has warned of a major accident at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia power plant after the latest drone attack. Russian authorities who control Zaporizhzhia say the complex was struck 3 times on Sunday, with a dome above one of the reactors damaged. Moscow, which blames Ukraine, has called it an act of nuclear terrorism. Kyiv denies involvement. The UN's International Atomic Agency says hostilities around the power plant should cease. More than 10,000 homes have been abandoned in Russia's southern border after the worst floods in decades. Communities have been evacuated along the Ural River after warm weather melted the snow and led to water levels rising by several meters within a matter of hours. Conditions have been described as critical, with an emergency situation declared across much of the Urals and western Siberia. Mozambique says at least 94 people have died and 26 are missing after an overcrowded and unlicensed ferry boat capsized off the country's northern coast. Initial reports say the passengers were fleeing an island to escape a cholera outbreak on the mainland, and the boat was hit by a tidal wave. Rescuers have managed to find only 5 survivors. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, sky-high spending. How North American businesses are cashing in on a solar eclipse as stargazers splash out on the event of a lifetime.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliette Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top story. Palestinians return to Gaza's Khan Yunis as Israel vows to press ahead with an offensive in nearby Rafah. China's Commerce Minister Wang Wentao is in Paris for talks with France's Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire. Discussions are set to focus on the European Commission investigation into whether China's EV industry has benefited from unfair state subsidies. Beijing denies the claims and says accusations by the United States and Europe over overcapacity are groundless. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Ross Cullen, watching events for us in Paris. Ross, how are these talks progressing?
Well, there's talks taking place at the French Finance Ministry. Bruno Le Maire hosting Wang Wentao for discussions. There's a lot for the two men to talk about, including these accusations of unfair competition and protectionism, with the European Union opening that anti-subsidy investigation into China in September last year. Ursula von der Leyen saying Europe is open to competition, but not to the race to the bottom. There's also this investigation by the European Union into China, launched in December, over biodiesel imports coming into Europe from China at, quote, artificially low prices. The European Union saying we cannot compete with such low prices. Now, for its part, China's got another investigation going into brandy exports from the European Union. 99% of those exports come from France. Investigation into anti-dumping. And so these are these tit-for-tat investigations by both sides, broadly the European Union, but specifically France and then China. For its parts, Beijing calling for prudence on both sides, saying that China firmly opposes protectionist behaviour. That's the message that Wang Wentao is likely to bring to Bruno Le Maire this afternoon.
China is accused of overcapacity. Wang Wentao addressing those accusations. What did he have to say?
Yeah, he said that these accusations are baseless, and also that when it comes to the supply chain, it's a perfect supply chain in China that is responsible for the increase in Europe of Chinese electric vehicles. On Sunday, Wang Wentao meeting with representatives here in France of BYD and Geely, two Chinese electric vehicle firms. About 8% of vehicles sold in 2023 in Europe in the EV market were Chinese, expected to about double or so to about 15% there for 2024. Expected also an increase in terms of the numbers in 2025. So there is the battle on the hands of European automakers to try to keep up with this number of Chinese electric cars that are now driving on the roads here in Europe. And we also have another investment conference going on, part of this meeting with Wang Wentao and his representatives from the Chinese vehicle market and also his counterparts from the French government. There is a roundtable going on, and that's why I'm speaking slightly quietly just behind me here at the Bank of China branch in Paris, and they're discussing about that investment relationship between France and China. French firms like Carrefour and Airbus, a European firm but headquartered here, about their investments in China and how both sides can try to allow reciprocal market access.
Ross, quiet or otherwise, great to see you. Thank you for that. Our correspondent, Ross Cullen in Paris. The US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says the relationship with China is on a stronger footing. She's coming to the end of her visit to the country, which intended to ease tensions between the world's two biggest economies. Our correspondent Jung Chung-Ying reports.
Over the past few days, multiple rounds of talks and meetings have been held between Yellen and Chinese high-level officials, and both sides have described the meetings as constructive, candid, and pragmatic. During a presser at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, Yellen spoke highly of the achievements that have been made over the past few days, outlining some progress when it comes to promoting the bilateral economic and trade ties. For example, the two sides have agreed to deepen cooperation when it comes to bolstering financial stability, fighting against illicit finance, and addressing the debt problems in developing nations. In addition to the agreements, the two sides have also exchanged views on some points of disagreements between the two sides. For example, the United States broadening and expanding restrictions on Chinese tech companies, and what Yellen repeatedly claimed, what she said, China's industrial overcapacity. And in response to that issue, Chinese Premier Li Qiang earlier said that the United States should view this issue more objectively and in a more market-oriented manner. So perhaps disagreements between the two sides still remain. But fortunately, the two sides have at least pledged to work together and to seek more common grounds and to deepen communication, which is a hopeful message of mutual cooperation that could possibly add to the stability of China-U.S. relations. Zheng Chunying, CGTN, Beijing.
Airport operators in Germany have agreed on a deal with security staff to end widespread strike action. The agreement comes after an arbitration process that was launched on Friday. The German trade union Verdi launched a pay agreement covering 25,000 workers. The strikes paralysed 11 airports across Germany with a large number of flights cancelled. Another aircraft investigation after a Southwest Airlines Boeing 737-800 departing from the U.S. city of Denver was returning after takeoff on Sunday after an engine cover blew off. The incident is the latest in a series of safety incidents involving Boeing aircraft. These pictures shared on social media showed what appeared to be the cover flapping in the wind. Southwest took responsibility, saying it was in charge of maintenance. China's first domestically made icebreaker has arrived in Hong Kong for the first time after its voyage to the Antarctic. The Xuelong 2 will be open for public visits, allowing the Antarctic expedition team to share all their research. Xuelong 2 set off from Shanghai last November and is China's fourth polar research vessel. An investment worth more than $3 billion, generating thousands of jobs in Brazil. The Chinese company State Grid Corporation has signed a contract to build a new power transmission line in South America's biggest country. Our correspondent Paula Cabral reports now from São Paulo.
Chinese company State Grid Corporation recently signed the largest contract ever in Brazil's electric transmission history to build more than 1,500 kilometers of power lines, an investment estimated at about $3.5 billion. State Grid won the right to build the lines in an auction held in Brazil last December and has up to 72 months to get the project up and running. The new grid will use a high-voltage technology already applied by the Chinese company in Brazil on another line, running 2,500 kilometers from the hydroelectric Belo Monte Dam in the Amazon all the way to Rio de Janeiro. The technology allows for reduced energy loss over long distances. The new line is being planned to carry energy from northeast Brazil, where there is heavy investment in renewable sources like wind and solar farms, but there is not enough infrastructure to deliver the power to the main demand centers in south and southeast Brazil.
As large as it may be, this investment is still far from fulfilling State Grid's intentions in Brazil, as the Chinese company has informed the Brazilian government of its interest in investing about $40 billion in the country's electric system over the next few years.
Brazil's Energy Minister Alexandre Silveira highlighted the importance of the partnership with China and with State Grid.
China is a great partner. It's important to highlight that State Grid's participation is very symbolic because State Grid invests in Brazil, in the Brazilian electric sector, not just in transmission. It holds 84% of the capital of CPFL, a distributor in São Paulo, which is, moreover, very recognized for its service quality.
State Grid also has important energy generation assets in Brazil, such as the São Simão hydroelectric plant in the state of Goiás, and is now also investing in a solar energy farm in the country's northeast.
The success of State Grid's investments in Brazil is also a display of the development of China and the success of the China-Brazil partnership.
Brazil is devoting a lot of attention to its energy transition, and the partnership with Chinese companies has been key to its success. Paulo Cabral, CGTN, São Paulo.
Now, the bills are sure to be sky high, and it could boost the U.S. economy by as much as $6 billion. A solar eclipse across North America has got stargazers splashing out on hotels, travel, and eclipse-themed merchandise. Our correspondent Poppy Muthuthing reports now from Washington.
As millions wait for the total solar eclipse that will cross over parts of North America Monday, back down on Earth, cash registers are ringing. The rare celestial event, where the moon will completely block out the sun, is big business for many places. According to one estimate, it could boost the U.S. economy by as much as $6 billion, as millions of stargazers spend on hotels, restaurants, travel and merch.
How much is going to be?
$9.95 for the day.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I got two. I'm doing that too. Thank you.
In the U.S. state of Texas, the economic gain is predicted to bring in $1.5 billion, as towns are in full eclipse mania and in a festive mood in anticipation.
I call this the most profitable 22 minutes in Texas history.
Science expert Bill Nye will host a viewing party event in the state. Entry, $325 per ticket. Elsewhere, airlines are offering special flights to get enthusiasts closer to the action. Even national companies have eclipse fever, with Krispy Kreme releasing a commemorative donut, and appropriately named Sun Chips will sell special eclipse chips for just 4.5 minutes, which is how long the celestial phenomenon will last at its maximum point. Poppy Muthuthing, CGTN, Washington.
The headlines again. Palestinians return to Gaza's Khan Yunis as Israel vows to press ahead with an offensive in nearby Rafah. Our other headlines, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says relations with Beijing are on a stronger footing as she wraps up her visit to China. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.